ESPN Radio 1080, The Team.
ESPN 1080 here in Orlando. Eric Lopez here as we're getting preview for the UCF-BYU game. We are now joined by CougarCenter.net. Brian Mace covers BYU sports. Brian, how's the weather over there?
It's not bad today. It's a little cooler than it has been all summer, but it's nice. It's looking good out there.
What's the mindset over there? You guys coming off a rough game against Utah where things just went AWire. What's the mindset over there going into this UCF game?
BYU fans and BYU players cannot wait to get back out on this field. They need something to get over that incredible, just horrible performance against Utah with the 7 turnovers and just getting completely blown out of the water and just not showing up at all. They need this UCF game, and people are really excited for this one.
Are they? What's the public perception of UCF over there in Utah? Obviously, they're coming off a disappointing loss themselves to FIU. They were ranked last year, won a Conference USA title, won the Liberty Bowl against Georgia. What's the outlook on UCF? What's the perception over there?
I think a lot of BYU fans in general, and a lot of college football fans out here in Utah, aren't too familiar with UCF. But they're a solid program. They haven't been around in the FBS quite as long as BYU or Utah out here, but these guys can play. They one of the best defenses in the country. I mean, people out here have got to realize that this is not going to be an easy game for BYU to win at all.
Let's talk about your team offensively first. Jake Heaps, your quarterback, had a strong year last year after a slow start. You had a good bowl game, high expectations. You had the good win at Ole Miss, tough loss at Texas. I mean, I know Coach Menderhall's played a tough schedule. What's been your thoughts so far in BYU's offense?
The offense has been quite a letdown. Everyone was expecting these guys to come out, be putting up 40 points easily per game, not even seeing Jake Heaps in the fourth quarter because he'd be over on the sidelines smiling and talking to the cheerleaders. But it hasn't been quite that easy. There's been a lot of growing pains with the new offensive coordinator, Brandon Doman. Heaps, he's put up some nice stats. I mean, He's 73 for 126 on the year, 58%. He just hasn't completed enough of those passes, and especially passes down the field. And the running game has just been horrible. BYU has not been able to establish the run in either of their first 3 games. They're absolutely going to need to do that against UCF if they have any hope of winning this game.
Has there been an explanation why they've struggled as much? Because you're right. I mean, they were really high expectations. BYU's always been known for offense for years and decades with a great quarterback tradition. I mean, Jake Heaps broke many of the freshman records in BYU, which is saying something when Ty Detmer, Steve Young, Jim McMahon, and others have played there, Steve Sarkisian. What has been what's been the explanation for the struggles?
That's the tough question. Everyone out here is trying to figure that out. Is it Brandon Doman with his growing pains in his first season calling plays? Is it Jake Heaps not being mature enough? Is the offense just not as talented as we all thought they were? In my mind, I think the talent is there. BYU just got to be able to maximize the talent. I think it's a combination of a sophomore slump for Jake Heaps as well as a first-year offensive coordinator just not clicking on the same page yet. Because the talent is there. We've seen it. We saw it last year. Late in the season, these guys got going. It's just a matter of, putting it into action once again.
Move the ball over to the defensive side. I know that's where Menderhall takes his pride, Coach. And you guys played great against Ole Miss. Strong game against Texas. I mean, you really were against it against Utah with all the turnovers. I mean, you were put in bad spots. What's been your thoughts on your defense this year?
The defense is the reason that BYU hasn't been completely pathetic this year. That they're, just like UCF, this defense is the heart of the team. They have just been dominating teams. They're also one of the best passing defenses in the country. UCF is obviously the number 1 in the nation, just allowing 93 yards per game. BYU's 24th in the nation. They have been giving up 168. But this team has really been this defense has really been holding this team together. Awesome linebacker core. Picked up an injury last week with Jordan Pendleton, one of our leaders in the linebacker core. He could possibly be back. Probably not going to happen. But this defense is the only reason that BYU has looked good, and they're going to be a real factor in this game with UCF.
Give the Orlando audience a couple of names they should be on the lookout for as they're watching this game for BYU on both sides of the ball. They should obviously keep an eye on that are keys for BYU.
Offensively, you got to look out for Cody Hoffman and Ross Oppo. These two wide receivers have been awesome on the year. They're the lone bright spot here on the offense. Ross Apple scored a touchdown in each of the first 3 games, and Cody Hoffman, last game against Utah, he was 6th overall in BYU history with 277 all-purpose yards. Him and Jake Heaps took up for 98 yards in the first quarter alone. So you got to look out for those guys if BYU can get the ball going through the air. On the ground, you got to watch out for a guy named J.J. DeLuigi. He's kind of a shifty back. He needs space to get going, but if he can get in space, he's pretty dangerous. Defensively, got to watch out for Daniel Sorensen. Safety, he's been awesome this year. He hits. That's what he does. He brings the heat, and he can make some plays as well. He's got a few interceptions on the year. Also, transfer from USC, defensive lineman Hebron Fantupo. He splits out on the edge a little bit, mostly up through the middle, though. This guy can bull rush. He will get pressure, but he's going to have a tough time chasing Jeff Godfrey around back there.
We're speaking with Brian Mace of CougarCenter.net, covers BYU athletics. We're talking UCF-BYU Preview here on ESPN 1080. Talk about, obviously, Lavelle Edwards Stadium. UCF will be playing there. First time in program history. BYU will return the favor. I believe 2014 they'll come to Orlando. Just give the audience an idea what's it like to play at Lavelle Edwards Stadium and be at that stadium.
Yeah, it's an awesome matchup. 64,000 screaming fans. Nice setting right up against the mountains. You got the thin air that people love to talk about. I don't think it's really that much of a factor. Beautiful stadium. Kirk Herbstreit's been quoted saying it's one of the most beautiful stadiums in all of college football. All the fans are going to be welcomed. We're going to take real good care if you come out here. We throw a huge tailgate party over in the Marriott Center parking lot, just southeast of the stadium. If any UCF fans are making out there, let them know. That's the place to go. We'll definitely take care of them. It's going to be loud. It's going to be a great game. I cannot wait for this one.
What you mentioned this. I mean, they're looking forward to UCF. So clearly, I mean, is this a must-win for BYU to turn their season around? I know last year you got off to a slow start, but you had a tough schedule, lost at Florida State among others, but you turned it around. Is this kind of a game where you have to is a turning point for BYU? Is it too early to panic?
I think it's a little too early to panic. It's not so much a must-win in my mind because UCF is a really solid team. I mean, people out here especially don't realize that this team's going to be good. They're going to do some good things on the year. It's just BYU has got to get going. Even if BYU doesn't win this game, they've got to find their offense mainly.
Talk about BYU's in the first year as an independent. Obviously, all the conference realignment and expansion is in the news, and BYU's name has been thrown out there for the Big 12 as a possible candidate. What is BYU's stance? Why did they leave the Mountain West to be an independent in football? I believe they joined the Big West in the other sport, basketball, I believe. Is that correct?
West Coast Law.
Yeah, okay. Talk about that move, and then could BYU be interested in moving back to go to a Big 12? What's the process there?
Yeah, they left the Mountain West Conference because they were completely disrespected time and time again. BYU and Utah created this conference, because the WAC was just getting ridiculous, expanding to 2 divisions, and they were the leaders in the conference. They were, always kind of disrespected by the other institutions, especially with the revenue sharing. And their TV contract was horrible with the Mountain. Now that they went independent with the ESPN, got this great ESPN deal. Tons of games on ESPN, tons of exposure, making a lot more money. They're making as much per home game as they were the entire season with the last TV contract. So that was one of the pluses, as well as getting the church name out there. They want to grow the church and the LDS faith, and that's one of the huge reasons they went independent. But yeah, with all this Big 12 talk, it's looking more likely that BYU will be joining the Big 12 than it did 2-3 weeks ago. But as we know, with conference realignment, it's completely fluid. It's always changing. Tomorrow it could be something different. The Big 12 could be dissolving again. At this point, a lot of BYU fans want the Big 12, and a lot of BYU fans just want to stop talking about it and let's play football. This could definitely even be a preview of a future Big East team and a future Big 12 team going at it here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's been the buzz around here with the future with UCF, certainly. So is BYU the Big 12? Is that a fit in your opinion? Would that make sense for BYU, or are you hesitant?
At first, I'm hesitant. As long as Oklahoma and Texas stay and commit to this conference, I'm fine with BYU joining. All I want for BYU is what's best for BYU. I've always been a proponent of independence, but if this is going to give you BCS access, even more exposure, for your other sports, because BYU's got a solid basketball program, and they're kind of being pushed to the side over in the West Coast Conference. It'd be great for all the other sports, especially basketball, baseball, and soccer, but when it comes down to it, it's about football. It's going to help with football. BYU is good enough to compete in the Big 12. We've seen that. They should have beat Texas. They beat Oklahoma a few years ago, especially if they can get into that North Division that historically is pretty weak in the Big 12, and now losing Nebraska and Colorado in that division. BYU would have, their free reign of that whole division in that conference. It'd be nice to see, and that BYU deserves something like this in my mind, especially football-wise.
And you mentioned the other sports. I mean, you had a great men's basketball program, Jimmer Fredette. You got the great run last year. You've got a good softball program. You got all these great sports. How have they been affected with this move, with football going independent, now going to the other conference, moving away from the Mountain West? Has it been at their expense? Because I know UCF has had a history, went through this about 8-9 years ago when football went to the MAC conference and the other sports were in the A-Sun, and that was tough. That was a very difficult adjustment for the fans because one sport you're playing schools from the MAC, and then in the other sports you're playing like local teams in the state, and financially it was kind of a difficult process before they finally moved to Conference USA. How has that been going for the other sports?
It's not really been talked about too much, but a lot of those sports haven't started playing yet. Besides women's soccer, so there hasn't been a ton of talk about it. But in the future going forward, if BYU stays in that West Coast Conference, I can see a lot of resentment towards the football team, especially from basketball fans. It's going to be real tough for them to deal with playing in really, really small gyms compared to the Marriott Center. Marriott Center is one of the biggest in college basketball on-campus facilities. There's a stat, I believe it was you could fit 6 of the other conference stadium or arenas into the Marriott Center. The Marriott Center is gigantic, 22,000 people. They're going to be going to 8 and 10,000 seat gyms in the West Coast Conference. So once that starts going, I can see definitely a lot of complaining, and we feel bad for those guys. They deserve better than that. They've been a solid program, especially a coach like Dave Rose. He knows what he's doing. He gets after it, and he coaches these guys up, and this is a good program, and they deserve to be playing in big gyms and big-time matchups.
Do you think that basketball and the other sports will push harder for the Big 12 than maybe football will? Or do you think they all would be in the same page and say, yeah, we want to go to the Big 12 and tell the administration, or do they stay out of it?
I think for the most part, they're staying out of it. I could, especially with Bronco Mendenhall, he's concentrating on football right now. He's said in the past he's out of the realignment picture. I'm sure he's got an opinion and he's voiced it, just not as vocal as, say, maybe Dave Rhodes in the basketball program, during the off season right now. If I was him, I would definitely be in the AD Tom Holmoe's office, letting him know, hey, we got to get out there. We got to do something better for these kids.
Talk about your offensive line. You got some pro prospects in there, big size. That certainly it's kind of been surprising why you haven't run the football, at least on paper. But talk about your offensive line.
Yeah, it's been tough because we've expected these guys the entire year to be able to just go out there and completely dominate other teams. They're huge. BYU's used to huge offensive lines. They've always been able to dominate other teams. Anytime you go into a matchup, the other team's always talking about how big our offensive line is. And like I said, it is incredibly surprising that BYU hasn't been able to establish the run. They've had a few issues with Terrence Brown at center with some bad snaps, talking about possibly moving him and sliding Houston Reynolds over from guard. Houston Reynolds is out right now with a busted up ankle. It's a possibility he could play this week. Most likely not going to. For his brother out there, left tackle Matt Reynolds, that dude, 6'6", 305. He's going to be in the NFL next year. Probably a first-round pick. He's one of the top tackles in the country. He does a great job of protecting Jake Heaps. But over on the right side of the line, it's been tough. That's where everyone's getting their pressure, and the right side of the line definitely needs to step up and help Heaps out.
Last question before I let you go. BYU's goals going into the season and now moving forward for the rest of the season. What are the goals, the expectations for BYU?
First, you got to get that offense going. You have got to establish a run game to help Heaps out. you've got to get these receivers going. They started going in this last game, but with the blowout and the complete letdown on offense with all the turnovers, they really didn't have a chance to establish themselves more than in the first quarter. The defense has got to continue to play as well as they have been, and Bronco Mendenhall has got to get this young staff ready to go towards the future. These guys are very young. They're still learning on the job, and it's tough for fans to deal with. But these guys, they're going to get it. It's just going to take some time, and hopefully that comes sooner than later.
Great stuff. Brian, tell the audience where they can find you, and then I know you guys do like a podcast on the site. I've already previewed the UCF game, I believe. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's CougarCenter.net. Make sure you go to CougarCenter.net, not .com.
Yeah.
And what was that?
Yeah, that's a very important. Good call on that. I agree. CougarCenter.net.
.net. Go to on iTunes. Just search Cougar Center. You can find the podcast there. It's also up on the site. Check us out on Twitter as well as Cougar_Center. Any questions about the BYU game or anything, hit us up. We'll help you out. If you're coming out to the game, definitely come check our tailgate out southeast of the stadium at the Marriott Center.
Check out Brian Mace's work there on CougarCenter.net. Brian, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you. You have a good one.
You too. That was Brian Mace. This is Eric Lopez for ESPN1080.com. Enjoy all the coverage of UCF as well as on UCFsports.com, as well as follows and videos from Provo, Utah, UCF, and BYU. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll talk to you next time. It's been a special for the UCF-BYU Preview.
ESPN Radio 1080, The Team.